Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, dear authors and invited guests. Welcome to a technical session 5A. On behalf of ICTIS 2021 and Global Knowledge Research Foundation, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the 5th International Conference on International and Communication Technology for Intelligent System through Zoom. We are thankful to everyone who present on this digital platform to go along with us digitally in these unpredictable circumstances of COVID-19 and making this conference more productive. Also, we wish everyone and their family to a protected time and we will all together pass this soon. We hope you will enjoy the 2 days of knowledgeful and interactive sessions. Just before we get started, I would like to introduce our session chair, Dr. Latika Desai. She's an associate professor and HOD in Dr. D.Y. Patil Institute of Technology, Pune. She has 22 years of teaching experience and her area of interest is digital electronics, data security, and embedded system. I welcome you, ma'am, and chair this technical session 5A. And there is
Thank
a
you.
special note for all the presenter. You will be given 8 minutes for their presentation, and after 8 minutes, I will raise the gentle reminder for a conclusion. We have a limited time, so please stick to the time. And I request to my team to. I would like to announce our first presenter, SG Gill, ICT in Indian Agriculture Opportunities and Constraints.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Good afternoon, session chair. So today I'll be speaking on the topic ICT and Indian agriculture, opportunities and constraints. So I'm just going to share my screen. So is it visible to all?
Yes, yes. You can
Okay.
continue.
Yeah. So my topic is ICT and Indian agriculture, opportunities and constraints. So India being an agrarian nation, so for economic transformation of every nation, of every developing nation, or say we can say developing nation specifically based on agrarian, you can say setup, it is significantly dependent upon the performance of agriculture. Fine. So the agriculture sector, it plays a key role in the lives of rural population, employment, and food security. So about 70% of Indian rural area, it is dependent on agriculture directly or indirectly for their living. So in the recent past, there have been a focus on exploring the potential of integrating the ICT with agriculture so as to increase the productivity and prosperity of the rural households. So ICT has made a considerable advancements in the past few decades, specifically in the past 4 or 5 decades since 1977, late 70s. So it has almost touched almost every area of the life. And of late, this impact is also felt on the rural population. Till now, the rural population, it was untouched by the, you can say, ICT, but now we are exploring the potential of ICT to increase their productivity, prosperity, and the quality of life which the people in rural India they are living. So this paper is basically on the constraints and the opportunities which we have if we want to integrate ICT in agriculture. So the key components for sustainable development in agriculture, they are the timely access to the vital information and the reliable of medium of communication, uh, which can be used to disseminate knowledge and ideas to the rural areas. The absence of both, it leads to, you can say, loss of productivity, if the decisions are poorly timed, they can result in the loss of productivity, and the lack of information, it can result in the wrong selection of practices as well as procedures. So further leading to loss of productivity. So information till now, it was more or less, the flow of information till now, it was more or less through the conventional media, such as your radios and televisions. And such information was predominantly supply driven. When I say supply driven, it means that the utility of this information is always very limited, because the information provided in this manner, it may or may not be useful to the end user. So what should be the solution for this? So if we just consider the problem of rural people, the information provided to them, information dissemination, it should be requirement or user driven, that what they wish to have, they should be provided that type of information, and at that period of time when they require it. The need of ICT in agriculture, the basic thing, why we need it, to make farmer or rural population information rich. Till now, the farmer or rural people, they are basically living in diverse, discrete pockets. So they are basically isolated from the rest of the world as far as information is concerned, not from all the aspects, as far as information is concerned. So the objective to integrate IT and agriculture is to make the farmer or the rural population information rich, so as to bridge the gap between the people who have the information, we call them information rich, and who don't have the information, that is the information poor. It can also address various other social issues which the rural population is facing. It can be gender discrimination, it can be poverty, caste disparity, and so on. So who has to play this role if we want to go do away with these social issues, we want to enhance their, you can say, quality of life? The government agencies along with the private players, they have to play a key role. NGOs and welfare bodies also have a role to play in this particular thing. And moreover, above all, the education and research organizations. When I say education and research organization, I'm mainly focusing on the agriculture universities who are dealing with the, you can say, agriculture procedures and practices, and their specific extension departments. So till now, out of the key ICT initiatives taken up in India, so I am taking up the Village Knowledge Center. Your Village Knowledge Center, it was set up in 1998 by MS Swaminathan Research Foundation. Initially, this particular project was taken up in the areas in and around Pondicherry, and the setup was such that there was one nodal center called Village Value Addition Center, or we can say VAC, and 10 VKCs were attached to it, Village Knowledge Centers were attached to it. Each and every knowledge center was connected to the nodal center with the help of internet-enabled computers, radios, and radios and telephones were there. They were given audio-visual aids as well for local, you can say, information dissemination. The main aim of the project was to achieve food security in rural belt. Fine. When I say food security, that means the main aim was to achieve food security as well as the self-sufficiency of rural population. Complete solutions, they were provided from village knowledge centers, ranging from crop selection to crop production, crop protection, crop harvesting, and post-harvesting practices and procedures, which include packaging as well as marketing. So information was created as well as supplied in local languages, so that it is easily understood by the people. Then another initiative was in 2004 by Ministry of Agriculture. Now the objective of this initiative, which is called Kisan Call Center, it was to provide answers to the queries of farmers in their native languages, because farmers, they are always not comfortable in, you can say, Hindi also, what to talk of English. Okay? So these Kisan call centers, they operate with the minimum hardware and operating cost. The cost of setting up this center was minimum. There was only one computer with internet and teleconferencing system. So whenever a farmer dials a toll-free number, a subject is there to answer his or her query in the native language or Hindi or English. If the farmer is not satisfied with the answer provided by the expert, then that particular thing is question is passed on to the person who is in the next level of hierarchy in terms of expertise. About 25,000 calls are attended on daily basis by these projects. Then was Bhumi project. It was related to computerization of the land records in Karnataka. And now this particular thing has been extended to the entire country. Fine. So a person can go over there and get the record of that his or her land by paying a nominal fees, and that can be used by various agencies, right from legal agencies to the financial organizations such as banks. So then was iKisan project, again a simple project set up by iKisan. It included a web portal and the information kiosk, just like the ATMs at the village level, from where the GUI enabled kiosks were used to impart knowledge to the people. So lastly, the much talked about the National Agriculture Market, or the NAM. The online model of this particular thing is called eNAM, electronic NAM. The aim was to connect the pan-India agriculture market. Still now 962 have been connected to provide an online trading platform to the farmers directly, so that they can directly sell their produce to the buyers. Nearly 16 million farmers are using this platform for buying and selling directly to the buyers. So now the constraints. What are the main constraints were the financial implications. The stakeholders, they have a very limited expertise and exposure. So it's a big challenge to educate them in handling and usage of modern communication systems, tools, services, which are ICT enabled. So for this matter of fact, a high initial investment is required for setting up infrastructure to provide them initial trainings to use these things. So maintaining and updating costs, they are also significant. So these things, they are not possible without financial backing of the government. Fine. So then is the inadequate access to the telecommunication infrastructure. The quality and access level of ICT services, they are very poor in rural areas. With less number of users per unit areas, the cost of setting up this type of infrastructure is very high. Moreover, when in the rural India, 86% of the farmers, they're small and marginal farmers. So their low income levels makes such services even unaffordable for them. Even if the infrastructure is developed, the cost of devices and services is prohibitively high for them. So this issue was particularly highlighted in COVID phase when students of the rural areas had to discontinue their studies as online mode was not financially viable to them in terms of procurement of gadgets as well as the cost of services. So this particular thing is widening the gap between the information rich and information poor in the rural areas. So language limitation is again a key aspect. 82% of the people involved in agriculture, they are small and marginal farmers. Now the present data, it is 86%. I just today
Dear presenter, sorry for interrupt. You have a last 1 minute.
Okay, ma'am, I'm just finalizing. So they're either illiterate or they have inadequate access to the, you can say, such resources. Their education level is inadequate. So further, the diversity in culture, so is different. There is diversity in language and culture. So they need to get these customized solutions in their own languages. So with them, so ICT methods for agriculture, it's a big challenge. And language barrier has been highlighted again. So what is the conclusion? So it has been established that ICT can play a pivotal role in sustainable rural development. These projects have been success. Timely information is always relevant to them. So it has revolutionized extension services. So what further? The further thing is the communication models should be focusing on the information exchange rather than one-way information delivery. Fine, there should be exchange of ideas. So rural India is moving at a slower pace, but substantially it is moving at a gradual pace towards inclusive growth. So harnessing technical advancements, so it is up to the, you can say, stakeholders how to manage it. So government support is particularly in infrastructure development and upgrading is must, because without government support, inclusive rural growth in rural India is not possible. And lastly, the last point, the progressive farmers, they should be involved in policy planning and implementation, because although they are rural people, they are farmers with very little formal knowledge, but they are into this particular sector for the last many years. So they have vital amount of information and experience and expertise with them, which cannot be ignored. So that's all from my side. Yes, any doubts in queries, you can say any questions, please.
Thank you so much for your presentation.
Yeah.
Dr. Gill, your presentation is fine. You are focused on all the constraints and all the details. But just I want to ask you one question, that is, what are the challenges of ICTs it is implemented in the agriculture? So agricultural people, what challenges they are facing?
Ma'am, actually the challenge is that first of all, there is a hesitation level. There is a hesitation level. There is a barrier in hesitation. The hesitation level is in two aspects. First of all, the people who are involved in agriculture, they are not even comfortable with the gadgets. Fine. Then the content management is definitely an issue, because the content, it is provided in, you can say, English or Hindi. And in most of the places, the pamphlets are available in the regional languages, but the application and the web portals, they are only in English and Hindi. So these, you can say, online resources, they have to be in local languages. Thirdly, it is very hard to convince them to follow new practices when they are in the habit of, you can say, going in for the old practices they have been following for decades. So there has to be a sound, you can say, justification and sound interaction between the experts and the people on field, so as to convince them that, okay, these new procedures are there for your betterment. Fine, let us give them a try also, because by watching online radios, they are not going to give their old practices and just going to follow the new on the basis of just one talk of 2 or 3 minutes. So there are some things.
In short, you want to say we have to give some trainings to them. Yes?
Definitely.
Okay. Thank you. Richa, next speaker.
Thank you.
I would like to call our next presenter, Jayjeet Bhattacharya, Estimation of Economic Impact of National Open Digital Ecosystem.
Sure. Can I share my presentation?
Yes, please.
Can you see my presentation now?
Yes.
Okay. So as the paper topic suggests, I'm going to talk about estimation of economic impact of national open digital systems. What national open digital system is essentially opening up the government systems for it to be used by the private sector, specifically startups, so that more value-added services can be provided. And the point that we are really looking at is what is the value add to the entire economy if the government opens up all its systems to the private sector and to the startups, and an estimation of that impact. So what we have done is we have taken the case study of Indian Railways Catering and Tourism Corporation, IRCTC, and an attempt has been made to capture the economic impact of open digital systems in India. So we have taken IRCTC as a benchmark and as a proxy indicator. And we have calculated that since IRCTC has opened up, so how much of value add IRCTC is providing to startups. As a summary, the study indicated, based on our research, it turns out that about $147.59 billion could have been added to the Indian economy in 2019, which is approximately 5% of the GDP. This also seems to be validated by other studies that have been done elsewhere using different methodologies. We used a very different methodology. Ours is a far more empirical methodology, whereas others were most of a estimational methodology. There is therefore an urgent need for strengthening the open digital ecosystems with key policy initiatives based on the research that we have done, which is specifically targeted for India. Now, a quick introduction. Public infrastructure generates significant amount of data. You look at taxation data, you look at trucks going through the public highways. There is data being captured, cars going through the public highway, data is getting captured, ports, shipping, railways, everywhere data is getting captured. But are we unlocking the economic value that is being generated from this data? We are calling that data is a new oil and so on and so forth, but what are we really doing about it? And especially when there's a large amount of data being collected by the government. There are many examples of government systems opening up to private sector to provide value-added civic tech services. Civic tech is a name for those startups which focus on technologies which have an impact on the civil society and the government. So as an instance, the open API policy has been mandated by the government. So these policy changes are happening, but there is no impact on the ground, very limited impact on the ground. Then there are others such as passport or driving license, which are online, but not compliant with the mandatory open API policy. What an API allows is on a real-time basis for a startup to dig into the government system and use the data on a continuous basis. For example, if I need to find out whether a person is claiming what they are, I would need to do a KYC and know your customer. And if I can therefore take the driving license and check it real time on the backend system, whether this driving license really is owned by this person, then that's a significant value add that I'm providing to the society. Unfortunately, such APIs are not readily available. And therefore, both the government and the economy is losing out by not opening up these systems. This deprives the citizens from innovative civic tech solutions that prevents unlocking of economic value from the real-time data of the government. Therefore, the methodology that we adopted was to estimate the economic impact of opening up of digital systems of the government. We took the Indian Railways as a proxy, specifically IRCTC as a proxy, because IRCTC has opened up much of its systems. Again, it's a very conservative proxy because it has not opened up all its systems. It has opened up a significant amount of systems, and we have not been able to get data of all the startups that are working on top of IRCTC because their revenues are not published. Now, this platform IRCTC is run by the government, so it's a good proxy for what would have happened if entire government would have opened up. So startups such as Trainman, Confirm Ticket have initiated offerings to bring in value add to the data coming out of IRCTC Digital. There are also entities such as Rail Yatri, which are putting AI on top of the data and giving predictions to travelers whether their waitlisted ticket will get confirmed or not. And these are very, very accurate predictions, and it's extremely helpful to the users, so much so that they are paying for these services, right? And that payment kind of shows what is the additional economic value that is being generated by opening up these systems to the startups. So the startups that we considered for the study are those whose revenues are publicly available in the public domain, and they're focused on food for railways passengers or ticketing for railway passengers. And this is to maintain uniformity in the comparison so that we compare apples to apples. There are two broad areas, search and prediction, which are the areas where startups such as Rail Yatri, Confirm Ticket, Trainman, and Ridler are doing. And the second is on food on trains, which is Travel Khana, Yatra Chef, Travel Zyka, and so on and so forth, who are doing that. So we calculate the total revenues S for the year FY 2019 from publicly available data. And S is equal to sigma of small s and I, where small s is the revenues from each of the startups, and I refers to the startups listed. Based on the above computed annual revenues, the ratio R of revenues from startups S to the total IRCTC revenue of 2019 was calculated. So R is equal to S by I. And using the ratio R, we estimate the total gross economic value of R that will accrue from startups that can potentially be based on the open digital systems of the government. So R is equal to R into G, where G is the total government revenues in India, which is including the central government revenues, the state government revenues, and the union territory revenues. So the result that we got was that the total revenue of startups using IRCTC data was about 0.0654 billion. We are just using USD and billion as the standards, so that it becomes easier to compare. IRCTC revenue was USD 0.19 billion. So the ratio R turns out to be 0.344, which indicates that startups have potential to generate approximately 34% of the total IRCTC revenue using the IRCTC data. And that's a significant value add. Now, extrapolating this to the total government revenues, which is of the central government and the state governments and the union territories, we find that the total estimated value of startups leveraging open digital ecosystems would have been 147.59 billion. There's absolutely empirical, and therefore it's a very hard finding. And GDP for India in 2019 was obviously $2.8 trillion or 2,875 billion. Therefore, from an empirical standpoint, the potential additional economic value that could have been obtained by opening up of the government digital systems is 5.13% or approximately 5% of the GDP in 2019. So by opening up of the government systems, we estimate that there would have been a value add of 5% to the government GDP. As per the trading economics forecast, India's GDP is expected to be approximately 3.2 billion in 2025. So 3.2 trillion, which is 3,250 billion under normal circumstances. And this excludes the government's published policy of propelling the economy to a $5 trillion economy. Therefore, by 2025, the potential additional economic value of opening of the government digital systems is 5% of USD 3250, which is $162 billion of additional value add that we would have had from the digital economy if the government data was opened up. Obviously, the GDP is expected to grow at a faster rate due to government's focus. Now, this paper was written pre-COVID. There may be an impact of COVID on the growth of the economy. But as per the paper at that point in time, we had written that it will be at a faster rate. And therefore, $5 trillion is achievable. That's now a bit of a question mark. But the outcome of the paper, which is that 5% of the GDP's value add can come by government systems opening up, still stands hold over here. There fortunately has been a validation of all that we have done. The government itself has come out with a policy on national open digital ecosystems.
Dear presenter, you have last 1 minute.
Sure. Albeit it's not a very detailed paper, but the study by Omidyar Network and Boston Consulting Group, as well as McKinsey, also show that there has been a 5% value add to the GDP if the global government systems open up. And the McKinsey paper was taken forward by the Australian government, and the same methodology was used to again calculate that the Australian economy will also gain by 5% if the systems are opened up. However, the previous studies were more of a guesstimate rather than any hard research. Ours is the first hard empirical database research on this area. And from an Indian perspective, where there are a huge amount of taxpayers' money invested into creating the government systems and generating data, it makes a lot of sense to open up the systems. I think the conclusion is very clear that we need to have more aggressive policies to open up the government systems. And there needs to be a very strong SLAs, a service level agreement from the government for providing its services. It cannot be an iffy system that they provide to the startups. I'll stop over here with that, and thank you for your patient hearing.
Thank you so much for your presentation.
Dr. Bhattacharya, your presentation is informative. All the analysis you are given. Just I want to ask one question, that is related with the NODE approach. What type of data security and privacy related risks you can handle?
Yes, that needs to be solved as part of the APIs. The APIs need to provide that. Again, it depends if the data really has personalized information. If there's no personalized information and there's aggregate information provided, for example, in the case of RailYatri, where the data is going into teaching an AI system, there we don't really need a personalized systems. But the moment there is personalized data involved, the APIs need to take care of it, and it has to be designed in that fashion. Absolutely, right. And those are details that needs to be worked out when the APIs are being designed. In fact, in addition to that, the scalability of the APIs also needs to be looked at.
Okay. And I have gone through the presentation. So you are already agreed up to 2019. You have gone through the papers. So I'm just giving the suggestion that is up to 2021, what is modifications are already done, just go through it. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
So we can move ahead. Now I would like to call our next presenter, Swapnil, digital forensic tool for cloud computing environment.
Is it visible now?
Yes.
So my paper title is Digital Forensic Tool for Cloud Computing Environment. Uh, the digital forensic is a branch of forensic science encompassing the recovery and investigation of material found in the digital. That means, in short, it is aimed to identify and recover the digital evidence like data, metadata, logs, etc. through the valid and acceptable method. Okay, it is digital forensic is broadly divided in three categories: there's computer forensic, mobile device forensic, and network forensic. In computer forensic, we include computer devices and mobile, whereas in mobile forensic, we use mobile devices. On the other side, in network forensic, we analyze the network data which passing through the router, firewall, and other network devices. Okay, the process, there are various different processes that to perform the digital investigation, but these four processes are included in almost all the framework. So that is the first is the identification, in which you identify the source of evidence. Then acquisition and preservation, in which you acquire the data, collect the data, and make sure its integrity through the hash value. Then examine and analysis the data, examination and analysis the data. That you identify the traces of the activity or identify the data, and at the end you perform the reporting of all the activity of the data using documentation. To perform all these activities, there are so many forensic tools available. But all these forensic tools available, we are designed considering the standalone computer system and not for the cloud computing. So when we use these tools with a cloud computing environment, we face so many problems, and that's because cloud computing has a virtualized and distributed component. It also combines various technology, and multi-tenant architecture of the cloud computing will make it very difficult to keep the privacy of other customer also. And so many of the tools require the direct physical access to the devices. So it is not possible every time to directly connect this concept tool to the cloud computing system. So in this paper, I have identified some forensic tool which can be useful and which will be useful in the cloud during the forensic investigation of cloud computing. So in that, I have included two types of forensic tool. That is a traditional forensic tool, which is used for standalone system, and the other category is the cloud-specific tool. In the traditional forensic tool, there are NCase, FTK, SANS, the Sleuth Kit, Volatility, Explico, Kane, Xwave, and ProDiscovery. Whereas in cloud-specific forensic tool, there is OVAID, UFED Cloud Analyzer, Frost, Forensic Acquisition Analysis System, Foreign Visor, and CrowdTrail. So in the first NCase, the NCase is a very famous forensic tool, and it is assisted in recovering hidden data and delayed data. It also analyzes data from various sources, including disk, memory, browser data, email, and etc. It also supports data acquisition from cloud services such as Facebook, Twitter, Gmail, and Google Drive. Also, the second is also a famous tool which is FTK. It is used for the data. It is also used for the data collection, analysis, and creating report. The main benefit in the forensic toolkit is it acquire not only static and live evidence, it acquires the remote evidence also. So this can be useful for the cloud computing environment. Okay, parallelly, along with this, it support your parallel execution of analysis and examination. So this thing will reduce the execution time of forensic. Then next is a Sleuth Kit, which is a command line tool and C library. It utilizes for disk image analysis. It supports various file systems. It also identify files which are hidden by the rootkit also. The Autospy is another forensic open source forensic tool which use this Sleuth Kit as its background also. The next is a volatility. Volatility is used for the memory analysis, that is RAM analysis. That's why we call it volatility, because RAM is the volatile memory, and that's why it has been given a name that is volatility. Okay, it is utilized to extract information from running processes, network socket, network connection, DLL, and registry. Okay. After that, this is the Explico. Explico is specifically used for the network forensic analysis tool. It extracts and reconstruct the content from the packet captured by the packet sniffer and the Wireshark and TCP dump. Then Gebhardt and Reeser design a generic model for network forensics in a cloud environment, which also use Explico, which implies that Explico can be very useful in cloud environment. Then there is a chain also. It is a live Linux live distribution, which indicate various forensic tools that will be that is useful for the cloud forensic. Then next is Xways. Xways is a powerful disk analysis tool. Like a Snoot is also a disk analysis tool, which provide you the features that capture free space, slack space, interpartition space, and text also. It produces detailed drive content table and all the existing related files and directories. Like the other tools, it also support a various file system also. And this is the last tool in a traditional tool set, which is the Pro Discovery. It is also a disk forensic tool which provides a disk acquisition and analysis feature. The graphic viewer, registry viewer, Outlook email viewer, internet history, and event logger, which are the part of the Pro Discovery tool, which makes it very convenient to use it and to work efficiently. It also supports a VMware to run captured image. So it is very useful. When you capture when you get an image from the cloud.
Dear
After that,
presenter, you have
yes.
last 1 minute.
Okay, ma'am. There are these are the forensic specific toolkit which is published in just 2000, and this is the first toolkit which is specially designed for the cloud forensic cloud computing environment. So it need to directly integrate with the cloud system. The next is the which is specifically used for the infrastructure as a service environment. It reduce your dependency from the cloud service provider, but it has some limitation that it need direct access to the cloud service. Then after that, UFED is also commercial tool which acquire data from various social media, including the Facebook, WhatsApp, Twitter, Google, which use cloud as its backend. Then ForenVisor recently published a paper which used a hypervisor to perform live forensic directly on the hardware in the virtualized environment. It acquires process data, raw memory, IO data by placing it between the operating system and hardware. But it has some limitation that like it store data locally, which may disrupt the original event also. It also compatible only with the FAT32 file system. The last is a AWS based cloud trail. You get it with AWS cloud service also. So in conclusion, I can say investigator confirms with various technical challenges during the cloud forensic, but there are lack of tools that useful during the cloud forensic. So these tools that are present in this may be helpful in the cloud forensic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Swapnil, for a great presentation.
Mr. Swapnil, you are gone through the different tools which we are using under the cloud computing environment. Can you tell which are the issues and challenges which related with the cybercrime, how to resolve these things?
In a cloud environment or in general environment?
In cloud environment.
Actually, the cloud architecture is very different from the standalone system. Just like I told you, virtualization on all these things. So it is very difficult to apply this forensic tool and any forensic tool on a cloud architecture, as well as all the cloud services. Just like you can take cloud, Google Cloud or AWS Cloud, they have their own architecture. That is very difficult to create a unique tool to perform this solution on all the architecture. So you at the end you have to depend on the cloud service provider. Even in India, when when a police law enforcement officer need a data from cloud server, so they have to go to the cloud service provider and they have to get the written application from written later that it is the authenticated data. So there is till now there is no specific methodology that get you a proper evidence, reliable evidence from that.
Okay. So somebody want to take the data, access the data at that time. What are the constraints are there?
Consider the first thing is that if you are using a private cloud, then it is very easy. You can go. It is all your data. You can go and grab it. But if your data is on a public cloud like AWS or Google or Amazon, so the data. If you have data, you have access to the data. Yes, you can access the data. But if you want to know detailed information about data, the what is the metadata or where it is stored in India or any other country or any other location. So it is they don't provide you this detail unless and until you make a contract with make a contract with them, and you ask them to give you detailed information. So till now, if you are using as a customer, as a single customer, not a organization or big organization, when big organization make a contract with them, they ask them to give their detailed information. Unless and until, in short, unless and until you make contract with them, they won't give a metadata of your data. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Sapna. Hand over to Richa.
Now I would like to call our next presenter, Divya Singh, Life-Fi and Emerging Technology.
Good noon to all. Am I audible?
Yes, Divya, please start the presentation.
So the topic is the Li-Fi and emerging technology, and the content just a minute. My screen is visible to you?
Yes.
Yes.
Just wait. Okay. So the content of the presentation are introduction to Li-Fi application, means just review of the Li-Fi. So introduction, basically Li-Fi is the light fidelity. So in the Wi-Fi system, we transmit the data by using the radio waves to transmit information, while in Li-Fi, light is used to transmit the information by using the LED bulbs. So LED bulbs are used for transmitting the data in the form of in the digital form, that is the 1 or 0, by varying the intensity of the light. So three major components are there for the implementation of Li-Fi: emitter, so to emit the light signal, RF driver, and power supply. So this is the assembly in which a bulb is situated, and a dielectric material serve two purpose: waveguide and the electric field. Sorry. So RF driver is the major component that is used for the implementation of the Li-Fi, that uses LDMOS device. So LDMOS device basically a laterally diffused MOSFET, that is planar double diffused MOSFET, used in microwave power amplifier, RF power amplifier, and other high frequency applications. So this driver converts electrical energy into RF power, because in case of the Wi-Fi, we use the radio waves. So in this case, light is used in case of the Li-Fi. So power amplifier is designed. Now the come to the working of the Li-Fi. So the procedure is very simple. If LED is on, then we can transmit a digit 1. If it is off, then we can transmit a digit 0. And the light can be varied according to the our requirement, that we want to transmit the one, either 1 or 0. So we have to just vary the rate at which the LED flicker depending upon the data we want to encode. So thus every light source will work as a hub for data transmission. This is the comparison between the Li-Fi and Wi-Fi. So the different parameters are discussed. That is the speed, range, data density, security, transmit, receive power, device to device connectivity, reliability, and interference. And for according to the today environment, data density and security are the major parameters that we want to uh, uh, achieve. So data density and security is high in Li-Fi as compared to the Wi-Fi system. Otherwise, all parameters almost same. Number of applications are there. So we can replace the Wi-Fi. So it is used in medical instrumentation, in aircrafts, in petroleum or chemical plants, traffic signals, GPS, underwater communication, RF spectrum relief. These are the advantages. So basically advantage are larger bandwidth as compared to the Wi-Fi, high efficiency because we need only the transmission of the data using the light signal, more availability because we have to connect only a number of LEDs. But in case of the Wi-Fi, we can achieve a portability. But in case of the Li-Fi, there is a limit. No license needed, green information technology. So number of advantages are there. These are some limitations. So Li-Fi means based on the light, so it can't work in the dark. Has a drawback compared to Wi-Fi, that is the portability. So that discussed previously. This is a future scope. So alternative to radio based wireless. So this is just alternative to the Wi-Fi systems. An emerging technology, so that is reliable. So this is the brighter, cheaper and greener future. This is the conclusion. So it overcomes the limitation of radio spectrum, high speed as compared to the Wi-Fi. Possibilities are numerous. So in this technology, we can connect a LED bulb, so that can be used as Wi-Fi hotspot. Cleaner, greener, safer and brighter future. May solve issues such as shortage of radio frequency bandwidth. Traditional radio based wireless is not allowed, such as aircraft or hospital, enabled by digital transmission technology. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Divya, for your presentation.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, you are muted. Please unmute yourself.
Sorry. Divya, you are presented very nicely the difference between Li-Fi and the Wi-Fi with different parameters. Can you tell me the bandwidth of Li-Fi and the Wi-Fi? How much bandwidth we are
Pardon,
using?
ma'am, pardon, please.
How much bandwidth we are using nowadays for Li-Fi and Wi-Fi?
In case of the Wi-Fi, we are using in the up to the 10 gigahertz. But in case of the Li-Fi, we can use up to the 100 gigahertz.
Okay. And what are the significance of the Li-Fi?
Li-Fi just replace the radio waves. In case of the just replace the Wi-Fi. So Wi-Fi uses the radio waves, so that have the disadvantage of the bandwidth or spectrum. While in case of the Li-Fi, we can use just a light for the transmission of the data. So we can say that the bandwidth or the spectrum increases in case of the Li-Fi.
Okay. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks. Thank you.
Now I would like to call our next presenter, R. Pallavi Reddy, tool of accessing intellectual quotation among children.
Good afternoon, one and all. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes.
Today I'll be discussing on the tool for assessing intellectual quotient among children. Cognitive assessment is used to evaluate the general thinking and reasoning abilities of a person, often referred to as intellectual functioning or IQ. Intelligence testing can determine the various aspects of the child's cognitive capacity. Coming to the introduction, cognitive assessment is used to determine the individual's general thinking and reasoning abilities. Intellectual function can also be assessed. Higher IQ represents the higher cognitive functioning and the lower IQ represents the lower cognitive function. These testing can assess the various domains of the child's cognitive capacity, and these tests aim to measure the mental capacity using the variety of categories that includes verbal skills, visual spatial reasoning, memory, and processing speed. The existing system used assessments only through medical reports. There was no proper tool for the assessment, and the people were facing the problem of late detection of the disorders. Coming to the proposed system, the tool, this proposes a tool for cognitive skill assessment based on the psychometric test. Early detection of disorders or gifted abilities. Actually, these psychometric testing is performed based on the theories of intelligence, such as Charles Spearman, they focused on the general intelligence. Howard Gardner focused on the multiple intelligences. Louis L. Thurston focused on the primary mental abilities. So the main advantages of the proposed system focuses on understanding how the brain works, identify the students who are at risk of falling through the cracks. It enables the process to improve the intelligence and offers valuable diagnostic insights. The main objective of the system is to assess the cognitive skills of the children based on the multiple intellectual factors, to compute the intellectual quotient of the individual, and finally, it generates a profile of the child's performance in IQ testing. And a report is generated based on the child's performance, and it minimizes the human effort. These objectives can be achieved by automating the process of evaluating the children's intellectual skills, which can reveal the cognitive strength and weaknesses. And these cognitive assessments are based on games and can easily captivate the children with their fun nature. And this reduces the amount of time spent by the teachers or the administrators, particularly in high volume testing. The figure depicts the architecture of the assessment of intellectual skills. This focuses on mainly 8 elements. To start with the architecture, the user must first fill the details, enter the details. The user takes all the individual tests such as verbal comprehension, processing speed, working memory, and general intelligence. All these individual scores of the task are calculated and stored in the database. Finally, the user's analysis is displayed in the analysis module in the form of normal distribution curve. Coming to the modules, it consists of verbal, these are the modules that I'll be discussing now. The first module consists of the verbal comprehension. It is the ability to grasp and express general knowledge and explain the concepts using a variety of vocabulary. This is a capacity where to recognize the significance of verbal stimuli. Verbal stimuli. And this verbal comprehension measures the child capacity to apply the word knowledge to reasoning skills, with reasoning skills to help in understanding the environment. This module comprises of 2 submodules. It consists of odd one out and the antonyms. On the odd one out, mainly the objective is to guess which one of the 4 items does not belong to the group. And the antonyms module, it mainly finds, it mainly finds which one is the opposite of the given word. Okay, having successfully found, the user will score 1 point for selecting the correct object. Processing speed, it is one of the main component of the cognitive process and is one of the most important competencies in learning the academic success, mental development, reasoning, and experience. It is defined as the amount of time it takes a person to perform the mental task. This processing speed takes the information, make the sense of it, and begin to respond. The processing speed consists of two submodules: compatible, picture patterns. The compatible, it is a module where the user has to click the opposite or the same arrow button according to the direction of the arrow as fast as possible. The picture pattern or the image pattern module, it focuses on correctly predicting the next possible pattern of the given picture. Coming to the next module, that is the working memory. The working memory mainly focuses on the cognitive psychology, neuropsychology, and the neuroscience. This working memory temporarily stores, manages the information, and carry out the complex cognitive tasks such as learning, reasoning, and comprehension. This further divided into two submodules. It consists of number series and the memory game. The number series consists of series of numbers to which user has to guess the number based on the question. The memory game, it is a picture will be displayed to the user for the first few seconds, and later the picture disappears, and then the question will be asked and the user needs to answer based on the given question. So for whatever the child or the student answers the given question, if the answer is correct, then a point is recorded to the student's account. The general intelligence, it is a fluid ability to integrate the multiple cognitive abilities in the service of solving a novel problem, and accumulating the crystallized knowledge further facilitates the high-level reasoning. These are the most general tests, which includes the Stanford Binet test. It is mainly used for the general intelligence. This general intelligence, it includes all the questions of the above modules, whatever I had discussed, and are collectively presented in this module in a random manner. The student scores a point for every correct answer that he asks for it. Finally, coming to the profile and the analysis generation, the results of the individual experiments are stored in the database, and these results are extracted from the database and the report is produced. And finally, the analysis is done by using the normal distribution curve or the bell curve as depicted in the figure. Coming to the results implementation part, first the user needs to fill the details, the name, age, and the ID. Then this is the home page of the application where it displays all the available tasks or the tests that the child need to undergo. This is the verbal comprehension task where the user needs to select an option based on the given question. If the option is right or wrong, along with the explanation of the answer. This page is depicting to answer the question within the given time. If the child doesn't answer the question within the given time, then automatically the answer is depicted to the user. This is the picture pattern task where we come across in the processing speed. This is the result that it will be displayed. Total, how many number of questions are there? And out of those questions, how many number of questions that the child has attempted, out of which correct answers and the wrong answers, and based on it, the percentage will be calculated, and the speed also is considered. The average time is also depicted. This is the page.
Dear presenter, could you please conclude the presentation?
Yeah. This is the home page after completing all the tasks. So the user needs to attempt the test only once. Finally, the profile is generated. A download PDF button is also there where we can download the entire report of the child. The results are depicted using the normal distribution curve, and the graph is depicting where the red line points to the child's result. Green line depicts the acceptable IQ range of the given person. And if the IQ range, if it is between 80 and 110, then the user will be recorded as a normal person. If the score is below 80, then he needs some care. And if it is above 110, then the user has the talented skills. Conclusion. The reliable account of what the IQ scores reflect would enable a more cautioned use of these numbers to determine the access to opportunities that shape the individual life outcomes in modern meritocratic societies. The value of IQ testing is most evident in educational and clinical settings. The children who seem to experience the learning difficulties or severe behavioral problems can be tested early at an early stage. The future scope can be, the research can examine how motivational intensity modulates cognitive functioning on an IQ test. Further studies can also examine how the frequency of the monitoring and the nature of the feedback influence the performance on the IQ test. And monitoring and feedback plays a vital role and will account for the variation in the cognitive functioning. These are the references. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pallavi. Very nice presentation.
Pallavi, nice presentation.
Thank you, ma'am.
Can you explain shortly bell curve?
It is a normal distribution curve where we are considering the values of the students, whatever the test results that will be obtained, those values will be considered, and it is represented in the normal distribution curve where the values depict that we are taking a threshold of 80, and where 80 represents the normal value, and below 80 needs to be taken care, and above 80 value, then he is a very talented user.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Richa.
Yes, ma'am. Now I would like to call our next presenter, Don Du, an approach of enhanced PNCC for resident identification applications.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see all of you here on ICTIS 2021. So my name is Don Yui. So just wait for a minute. I will share my screen, right? Okay. So excuse me, everyone. Can you see clearly my screen?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you. So so I will start my presentation now. So first of all, thank you so much for your introductions, me, the chair of the session, and I would like to say so sorry for the serious situation of COVID-19 in India now, right? So I wish safe and healthy to all of you here and your family. We will overcome the COVID-19 epidemic soon. So for my presentation today, I'm so happy to introduce our research as an approach of BNCC on for resident identification applications. So this if we apply this technique for the voice detection for smart home application. So maybe in this session it only meets from another country, right? I see all of you from India. So I'm from Vietnam, so say hello to all of you. And about smart homes, as I see, smart home is now very popular in our world. So we see a lot of applications in smart home. So one of the most important things to the smart home is how we control the applicants, the device, TV, or the smart door, or a lot of smart things on your smart home now. So how we control this, and we are a lot of ways, different ways to control the device. We can use manually by a remote. We can use the remote to control this. We can use some gestures. And another things, another ways we can control this, we use the voice. Because the speak voice to control the device. So for example, so when you come to the door, you can use your voice to open the door. So the system can recognize your voice and see that you are the owner of the house, and there is can open the door. You can say that open the TV, for example, and so the house. So we need the system understand who is the owner of the house. Is the general is some people is authorized to the system to give some control device. For example, we use a voice control for home application, right? We can control a lot of device. So what's the problem is the voice control system. The first is some noise from the noise from the environment, right? We have a lot of noise from the machine, noise from winds, noise from the other people outside, or at least the noise from your voice also, right? Your voice can be very small, something very loud, right? So it's difficult for the system to recognize your voice. And another difficulty is the number of people is talking to the system, right? When we have a single people talking to the system, it's very easy to recognize the voice. But for in the case of a lot of people talking together, right? So it's difficult to recognize. So due to the such difficulties, we want to overcome this by the technique we introduced today, right? We want to in our system, we have applied some AI techniques to recognize the voice. So we have a two phase of training and testing. And in two phases, the first thing we need is recognize the resident utterance or the voice, right? And then we get a feature extraction of the voice and design, and we create the model of the voice. So and the process to proceed correctly without noise, right? We need to reduce the noise to the voice. So to reduce the noise, we introduce this system. We apply the technique called the PNCC. So PNCC is power normalized conceptual coefficient, right? So we in the voice detection, for the voice detections, there are some there are some different techniques for the voice detections. For example, we can apply the MFCC, mouth frequency conceptual coefficient, right? Or we can use BLP coefficient, called the perceptual linear predictions. We have some techniques like, and in this approach, we apply the BNCC for power normalized conceptual coefficient. And this technique is based on the power of the voice. It's for the ease of understanding, which is every people have their voice, and our voice is our power. Right? When we talk in some word, so the voice is come from your mouth, have some power, and the power is represented by the spectrum of the voice, right? So based on the spectrum, we can model the voice of the people. So that's the approach of the BNCC techniques, right? But to reduce the voice, to reduce the noise from the environment, to recognize the different voice from the many people talking at the same time. So we improve the techniques by adding the noise reductions elements on the screen, which is so instead of applies the traditional BNCC with a short-term processing, right? It is with a short-term processing. So we try to increase the processing time by adding some other elements to process for the noise. So we use the medium-term power calculations. Then we reduce the noise by temporal masking technique, and then we make the weighting smoothing for the voice and reduce the noise from the voice. So with this techniques, we can try to improve the accuracies of the voice detections. And for the results, so we compare the results of our approach BNCC with the improvement of the noise reductions elements, and we compare the results with the male frequency spectral coefficient MSCC, and the other technique is the perceptual linear predictions BLP, and the first material we take into account is the accuracy, the recognition accuracies. So we test the system in the different level of noise in the different with the different environments. So for the white noise, street noise, the music interference, the speaker reverberations. And for that's overall, so the PNCC can improve the accuracies about much, right? Improves for the white noise. And in the other case, for example, for the music noise, so with the music, right? So we can see as the low level of noise, the BNCC can improve about 30% of the accuracy compared to the other techniques. And at a medium level of noise, we can see similarly the BNCCs can improve much the accuracies.
Dear presenter, you have last 1 minute. Please conclude.
Okay, thank you. And the other materials is on the complexity, the calculation complexity. As we said in the many step, we collect the processing times for any step, and at the summary, the sum, right? This is sorry, the overall the MPNCC. Here our technique is has much more complexities in calculation than the others, because we straight up with the increase of the noise reduction elements. So this is I just introduced shortly about the approach of BNCC to reduce the noise in the voice identifications for smart applications. And the technique is apply the temporal masking technique to reduce the extra noise and reverberations. So for BNCC, this is high recognition accuracies compared with the other techniques. So this technique is quite popular in voice recognitions. And with the trade-offs, we need to trade off with about 33% increase in the computation complexity. And in the future world, we expect to apply some deep learning algorithm for the technique to recognize the Vietnamese voice for the smart home detection. This is about shortly about our research, and thank you so much for your listening. Is there any questions and discussions about the research? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Don.
Yes.
Your presentation was nice. I want to ask, just in one slide, PNCC for voice detection system, you are used before a normalization, you are used DCT, right?
This slide, right?
PNCC for voice detection system. PNCC for voice detection. Yes, this. So here DCT, you are used DCT, right?
Yeah.
So can you give the reason why you are used DCT there?
So this is the PNCC, right? So actually, so we are here. We have the several techniques for the voice detection system, but for PNCC, we based on the power of the voice, and it's actually it's which I try to approve based on the voice, the powers because we have the different ways for detect the voice, the frequencies, the balance the frequencies, the linear or the the similar voice over time. And the others for the PNCCs, we try to approach with the power, based on the power, and it's just a different approach for the voice, because we based on the different characteristics of the voice. So we try to use different ways.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hand over to Richa.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. I sincerely thank our authors and their excellent presentation and contribution in this session. All participants for being a part of this international conference. I hope this session was very informative enough. All the presenters would be getting their digital certificates within 2 working days. Further, all the papers will already forwarded to the Springer, and the publication will be live in 5 to 6 months. Kindly cooperate with the team of ICT IS 2021. I also thank our session chair for chairing this session, and I request my team to display the certificate. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your valuable presence.
All I would like to say, all the authors are presented their work nicely. I would like to say thank you for GR Foundation as well as ICT's IS team. A special thanks to Dr. Amit, Aman sir, and Richa. Thank you
Thank you,
all.
ma'am.
All of you. Best of luck for you all, and take care of yourself as well as your family. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And I kindly request to everyone to turn on their cameras for a quick snapshot to make this conference for more memorable. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, ma'am.
Everyone.
Stay safe. Take care. Take care, everyone.